Hello and welcome, adventurers. I'm Mary, and in this video, I'll be going over Easter eggs you may have missed in Final Fantasy XIV's patch 6.1 to avoid ruining your day. This video contains spoilers up to patch 6.1 and mild Final Fantasy IV and Final Fantasy XI spoilers. Now, let's get started. We start off with a lovely tea time with Tataru. She asks what our plans are now that the Scions are disbanded, and suggests we head to Thavnair. The tool she's using is the Phrygian Needle. So, just in case you've been wondering what level Weaver Tataru is, she's at least level 84. We doze off waiting for Tataru to finish the final touches, and we have a vision of a gray, desolate area with a figure cloaked in red-black flames walking towards a ruined arena. I'll talk more about this shrouded figure later on, but this area appears to be the same used in the World of Darkness raid. You can see the same crystal formation lining the floating islands. There isn't an arena structure that has walls like this in World of Darkness, but remember that time flows differently on the reflections. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that tens or hundreds of years have passed on the 13th since we fought the Cloud of Darkness, and new buildings could have popped up. While lowering Professor Jalheen's inhibitions, we learn about the legend of AlZadal III's secret treasure vault. While bemoaning how drunk he's getting, Jalheen quotes a Master Jalzan. He's referring to Jalzan Daimir, the alchemist featured in the Zodiac Braves relic quest. Jalheen tells us to seek out Xaom for information on his friend who went missing seeking the vault. Where you find Xaom actually depends on if you give Jalheen one final drink. If you signal for water, Xaom is at the Mihane at a nearby table. If you let Jalheen get too sloshed, he won't give you any details where Xaom could be, and he ends up being on the opposite side of Ratzet Han by the Dharma. I guess walking further is your punishment for getting an old man too drunk to speak. Xaom says his friend was told the location of the vault's entrance by a merchant in the bazaar. At the bazaar, we happen across a merchant named Zashal, who claims to have a map that not only shows the location of the treasure vault, but also bears a glyph of passage needed to enter. This was an unexpected reference and honestly made me a little giddy my first playthrough. Zashal is actually a character in Final Fantasy XI. He's a shifty merchant in Ottergan Whitegate that sells you a Remnant's permit, a key item needed to enter a series of exploratory missions known as Salvage, which take place in the AlZadal undersea ruins. Estinian spends all his assault points purchasing the map, and invites you along on his treasure hunt. Zashal packs up his stall after making this singular sale, which is a sly nod to only being able to buy one Remnant's permit per day in Final Fantasy XI. The map has a drawing of Virtra in the upper right corner, which makes you wonder why none of the Scions thought to consult Virtra about the legend of this treasure. I guess they thought there was some other four-winged, horn-nosed dragon drawn on the map. The new dungeon in 6.1, AlZadal's Legacy, is divided into 3 zones: Baflau Remnants, Arapago Remnants, and the Xaom Remnants. These are all names of different salvage zones in Final Fantasy XI. We come into contact with a new to Final Fantasy XIV mob, the Q-Trub. These are also from Final Fantasy XI and from the same expansion, Treasures of Ottergan, that this dungeon has been referencing. The salt-encrusted teleporter after the first boss is the same design that's used in the AlZadal undersea ruins. The Arapago Remnant strongly resembles the AlZadal undersea ruins with Ratsethan motifs. It has the same windows into the bottom of the sea that look like the water just ends. We come across an AlZadal rampart that summons monsters from the ocean to fight us. The rampart is also from Final Fantasy XI, as well as the monsters it summons. The Krakens and the Orobons, called Ogrebons here, were visible in the AlZadal undersea ruins windows to the ocean. The Zomets are from a different area and expansion, but the place they're found is nicknamed Sea by the players, and they're aquatic in look, so it makes sense. The second boss, Armored Chariot, is the mega boss of Arapago Remnants in Final Fantasy XI. Most of its mechanics are unique to Final Fantasy XIV, but it did get to keep Diffusion Ray, which was changed from a frontal attack to raid-wide damage. The next area, Xaom Remnants, has another new Final Fantasy XI mob, an Acrolith. These guys were mainly used as notorious monsters in Salvage, not as regular map mobs. After beating the dungeon and learning about the fate of Azdaia, we're treated to a scene with a throne room-like area elevated by long pillars that disappear into the clouds. The song that's playing is from Final Fantasy IV and is called Somewhere in the World. And then darkness coalesces and out walks Golbez himself. As he walks towards the central throne, 4 thrones attuned to water, wind, fire, and earth activate. These represent the 4 lords of the elements from Final Fantasy IV: Cagnazzo, Barbariccia, Rubicante, and Scarlamione, that served under Golbez. Fun little detail, the way the thrones are arranged in this shot is the same order Golbez and the 4 lords are portrayed in the opening movie for the Final Fantasy IV 3D remake on the DS. The Throne of Wind, Barbariccia, mentions not underestimating the Warrior of Light, which is a callback to her dialogue in Final Fantasy IV right before she fights Cecil and party. Virtra sets up the AlZadal Foundation to help orphans from the final days in Ratsethan. AlZadal was the merchant we met in the level 80 quests when we first got to Thavnair. He was also the first person to turn into a blasphemy, and was the final boss in Vanaspati. While Y'shtola is giving us a lesson on how summoning Void Scent through a Void Gate works, we see 3 mages summoning gargoyles for illustrative purposes. This scene takes place in Tamtara Deepcroft, and what better backdrop for this scene than a dungeon all about stopping the summoning of Void Scent? We've also seen seemingly lifeless statues turn into Void Scent before, like in Amdapor Keep and Hawk Manor Hard Mode. After getting permission from the forum, the Warrior of Light and Y'shtola make their way into the restricted section in Numenon. The music for this area is a very cool version of Ink Long Dry, the music that plays in the Great Gooble Library. The books you can read here are a real treat. The first one is called Untitled Goldsmith's Journal and chronicles someone's trip to the Void and meeting an alluring Void Scent. This is actually not the first we've heard of this goldsmith at all. Every single female Voidsent minion tells the tale of a Gridanian goldsmith who was hung for ritualistic summoning. His body went missing after his execution, and more sexy lady Voidsent minions are made, presumably by him. There's also a different journal of his in the Great Gobly Library, which chronicles his ill-fated summoning. He meant to summon a succubus for, adult reasons, but instead summoned something with writhing tentacles. I've seen some people think this was a mind flayer, while others, myself included, think he summoned Ultros. Ulti would be drawn to all that horny energy. Anyway, let's put that book back. It should stay restricted. The next book is called Primal Disquisitions. It talks about how an entity that is summoned takes on the appearance and powers that it's attributed by the summoner. The author posits, what would be summoned if someone who only believed in the idea of an omniscient being completed a summoning ritual? This is pure speculation, but I think this book is supposed to tie up a loose end from 1.0. In the end of an era cutscene, Louis-Swa summons the power of the 12 to seal away Bahamut. What he summons is not what we see in the Myths of the Realm raid. It looks more like the page of a textbook with symbols of the 12. I think this means either that Louis-Swa himself didn't believe in the 12 as deities, or that he purposely limited the summoning to the idea of the 12, causing the resulting primals to take the form of knowledge rather than their traditional depictions. Let me know what you think in the comment section though. I'm interested to hear other people's takes. We learn from the research log of House Daymir that they studied a type of Voidsent called Atomos, who has the ability to open void gates at will. They managed to replicate this ability in an artificial Atmos that they used to widen a naturally occurring planar fissure. This isn't the first time Atomos has been used as a gate between dimensions. In Final Fantasy XI's expansion, Wings of the Goddess, Atomos-like creatures called cavernous maws are used as portals, allowing travel between the two timelines. In order to test the efficacy of the warding scale against the corruption of the 13th, Y'shtola shows off her very prestigious abilities and summons two Nixie familiars to venture through the Void Gate. We first saw Nixie as the second boss in Matoya's Relict, and the theme for the dungeon, called Freshly Baked Porksies, plays when they appear. Lastly, we're granted another vision of the 13th. The fire-wreathed figure from earlier is now fully visible and recognizable as Xenos' Reaper avatar. Yoshi P has mentioned in the past that the identity of Xenos' avatar was important. I have some theories on who this might be that I'll go over in my next video. That will be a full 6.1 speculation video where I'll go over Golbez's possible motivations and other musings. So please consider subscribing so you don't miss out if you're interested. Also, let me know in the comments if there's anything I missed in this video. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, adventurers, remember, you matter, and may you ever walk in the light.